So can you all find the commercial chapter revisions? There's the table again and the chapter with the orange in it.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Right, far away.
Right, thank you again. It's good to be back. I'm going to just go through...
Oh yes, how are you? How are you?
Much better, thank you.
Good.
There's 4 points I want to make in response to issues raised last week on the objectives and policies, and then I'll talk you through 5 different points which relate to the rules, and when I discuss those 5 points in respect to the rules, I'll address the point Councillor Johansson made about the large-scale development and its impacts on community infrastructure. The first point raised last time was the clarity in the chapter around the differences between key activity centres, district centres, neighbourhood centres, and really ensuring consistency. And that's reflected in some amendments to Objective 1. The last part of Objective 1, the reference to, while giving primacy to the central city, followed by district centres and neighbourhood centres identified as key activity centres. Now, that's supplemented by amendments to Table 15.1, which is on page 4. And in there, what we've done is separated out neighbourhood centres that are key activity centres from other neighbourhood centres.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing there is distinguishing those neighbourhood centres that are just KSEs from those that aren't. And just the third point is, in respect of addressing that issue, is Policy 1, Clause C. We've added text to recognise that we're prioritising support for neighbourhood centres defined as key activity centres. And so those 3 amendments seek to just provide some clarity around that.
What sort of criteria do you bring in to put some a centre KAC like New Brighton as a neighbourhood centre rather than a district one?
Yeah.
Compared with, say, you've got in the other area Eastgate, for example.
There's a number of factors we consider. The amount of retail floor space. We've had, in the last 6 months, surveys done of all the commercial centres across the city, so we've got up-to-date information about how much floor space is in them. But that's only one factor. There's also their accessibility by public transport. The size of the centre in terms of land area is another factor, as is the catchment it serves. And whilst catchments aren't strictly defined, generally speaking, a smaller centre has a smaller catchment than a larger centre. And so taking those factors into account, we've allocated different centres to those categories of district and neighbourhood. We've allocated key activity centres to those categories of district and neighbourhood centres. So just to take one strand of that, in terms of retail floor space, New Brighton, according to our surveys, has 20,000 square metres of retail floor space. And you compare that with Eastgate, which each have 30,000. Now that trigger of when does a neighbourhood centre become a district centre, we need to monitor that on an ongoing basis in the future and revisit that. But at the moment, in our view, New Brighton isn't serving that sub-regional function that you tend to see with the likes of Riccarton and Hornby, which do attract people from much further afield than smaller centres such as New Brighton. It's not diminishing its role, and it's still a key focal point serving those eastern suburbs. But we need to look at, as part of the master plan and the district plan review over the coming months, the size of that existing centre in terms of land area. Because if you have too large a land area and there's not enough demand for floor space within that land area, then you tend to dilute the concentration of where that retail floor space is located, and there's an argument to say that if you strengthen and focus on a core area, then you can achieve a better outcome. But that's something we need to look at more closely over the next few months. And so New Brighton the zoning of New Brighton is being reviewed as part of phase 2.
So if it shrinks in order to make it work better, this has an implication for its kind of status.
It doesn't change its role as a key activity centre, which we give primacy to. That's established in the land use recovery plan, but it does have a bearing on where we put it in the hierarchy. And even if it were to reduce in land area, let's say, in my mind it would still function as a neighbourhood centre.
So it could drop in the hierarchy in order to function better, a more compact CBD.
The risk of putting it into a district centre category is that it's not going to perform that function, and it's potentially the scale of development we allow in a district centre, which is up to 20 metre high buildings, is not necessarily appropriate in that context. So the place it has in the hierarchy has a bearing on the scale of development we allow in that centre. So taking a height, for instance, we allow up to 20 metre tall buildings in district centres, whereas in neighbourhood centres we only allow 12 metres. And if you put a 20 metre tall building up against the residential interface, arguably there's a need to look at address that. But 20 metre high buildings in New Brighton I'd view as potentially out of context with.
Well, it's zoned for that at the moment.
That's right. But
So what happens then if there's a flip over and the area does boom and we get that sort of development and maybe a few sizable sort of buildings there, is there the scope for a shift from one to the other?
Yes, there's always a scope for a plan change. This is what plan changes allow for. But at the moment, this is what's being proposed in the draft plan.
But New Brighton already has that.
It already has
It already
so,
has the rule that it can go to 20 metres along Marine Parade.
So I'm just wondering why we're downgrading it and rather than leaving it where it is, because there's a move afoot to try and sort of boost its fortunes, and if we're putting this sort of a proposal forward, it may restrict its ability to move
Will
forward.
that take away the zoning that allows them to build to 20 metres along Marine Parade?
The proposed provisions we've got in this chapter would reduce the height limit to 12 metres. At the moment, the current city plan has two different height limits in New Brighton. There's a 30 metre height limit and a 20 metre height limit. And to be perfectly honest, the central city the height limit in some areas of the central city is 28 metres. So you look at the hierarchy in terms of height and scale of buildings, and the central city would be dwarfed potentially.
Plan change that went through an independent commissioner. I remember the hearings well. I mean, I can't say that I was excited about the plan change, but I think it's inappropriate to make a plan change through this district plan review process and not tell people that's what we're doing.
But this is what we have been out with the public telling them about. We've been
there
very
wasn't a
clear
meeting
about.
in New Brighton. I mean, the truth is that, this is news to me. I actually hadn't realised until David asked that question that this reduces the height limit entitlement in New Brighton. I don't necessarily disagree with the outcome. What I disagree with is the process, because, I'm not sure, do the people in New Brighton know that this is part of the...
Okay. In our meetings that we've had that people have come to, we have made this obvious. There have also been information sheets, and as I say, it's been up on the website.
Well, sorry, but
all these
excuse me,
months,
we've been briefed as well.
Yes.
We've been to the workshops.
Yes.
This is news to me that you're reducing the height limit in New Brighton.
It's not new in the drafts that have been coming to you.
No, I understand that, but unless you actually say this means this will reduce the height limit in New Brighton, then how on earth would reading all of this have brought that to my attention?
It hasn't been made explicit, I think that's what it hasn't been made explicit,
No.
that's what's coming out, so yeah.
And I think, there's been a private plan change that's gone through and approved all this, and now we are, through the district plan, just wiping it.
This is the process of a district plan review, is to review the a plan, again, according to latest information and best practice. This is why we
I
undertake
understand
reviews.
that, but I was against the change. So, I'm speaking against the personal position that I adopted. I am not taking a position on the height limit. I am merely mentioning that in any legal sense, you really open yourself up to review if you don't tell people specifically, explicitly. I mean, it was. They led the plan change in New Brighton. It was controversial. Submissions on it, but it was decided to actually make a change to that without telling the community specifically that this will change that process. I mean, if the two councillors sitting around the table and the mayor who used to represent the area didn't understand that from any of the briefings that we've had, I'm sure that most people in New Brighton have no idea that that's the change. Yanni.
It is a really important point that you're raising, and actually this isn't the only area that's getting changed. No. My understanding in Addington, for example, there's been a whole bunch of private changes or plan changes that the district plan will actually change. So I think it would be really useful for us just to have a list of the changes, the date at which they came in, and what effectively this district plan does to those more recent, over the last sort of 5 years.
You've had 80 or 90 plan changes that have come to on the operative plan, and yes, in places these do go against those plan changes.
Okay, so what we need is a list of the plan changes that have come in recent times that are being changed by this DPR.
And the rationale for change.
I don't think I can, I would just give you all of them because I'm not sure what is meant by recent times, because some that may have gone through 10 years ago may also be...
the New Brighton one was 10 years ago.
To give you an example, like Kenaway Farms.
Yes.
So that had a plan change. There was a whole bunch of conditions, things that were supposed to happen there. A lot of those things actually haven't been done yet. The development's happening, and if this plan change is going to, the district plan review is going to come in and remove all the requirements for traffic intersection upgrades, developers to do certain things that they were supposed to do as part of the plan change, I think the local community and the community board are going to be incredibly upset.
We will give you a list of all of the plan change and how it's amended them, and I don't think you can assume that we're changing everything that has occurred in plan changes.
No, we're not. All we really want, we don't want to know like every single plan change that's ever happened to the district plan. What we want to know is what specific plan changes that have happened in recent times. So yes, I don't mind if you go back X number of years. But what we want to get a flavour of is what private plan changes that have been through a process, or what, that are being changed by this.
Happy to do that.
Happy to.
Yeah.
I think Addington around the racecourse is one area that's been brought to my attention, which I'm a little bit unclear about. So that they have been really recent plan changes.
We are happy to do that. And look, there is absolutely no intention to try and hide information from the public. The difficulty is having the... there is so much information in this.
Yeah, I know. And this is the hurriedness, this is the reality of dealing with such a major set of changes in such a truncated period. We wouldn't normally do this scale of plan change all at once. I mean, we're totally up for putting the effort in to get this right, but I have to say that is news to me that we have, by changing a definition of an area, reduced the entitlement around what was a controversial plan change. I'm sure people would want to make submissions on it.
I should add that New Brighton, I mentioned it before, the extent of the zoned areas being dealt with as part of Phase 2. The reason we haven't dealt with the extent of the zoned area in New Brighton as part of Phase 1 is the master plan, which is still a draft. There's further consultation planned over the coming months to invite feedback on how large the centre should be, and in that same conversation with the public we can ask the question about height and other matters. So there's an opportunity going forward to address this.
So this isn't changing the height restrictions in New Brighton?
What I'm saying is we can put New Brighton to one side and consult further on the height limit amongst other things as part of wider consultation on.
I've been asking for some time why New Brighton's recognised as a key activity centre in the regional policy statement, but it comes to us, it's a neighbourhood centre, and that was never, you know, unless we dug deeper, that was never explained why. Now we're seeing the implications of
I agree with Glenn entirely. You know, the land use recovery plan identified as a key activity centre. This is new to me, where we are now redefining the KACs into district and neighbourhood. There was never any, well, maybe I didn't read it properly, but KACs were KACs. End of story.
Well, no, there's always been a difference between what is listed as a KAC at a regional level and then how that's determined at a district level. The KACs have a certain function under the regional policy statement. All we're doing here now is ensuring that functions over and above KAC functions are recognised, depending on how large they are.
I would disagree, actually, and maybe this is a point for submission later on, that New Brighton is a neighbourhood. I consider it more of a district KAC. My opinion, but happy to substantiate it later. But and maybe that gets around some of these other issues of density and height.
But as Mark says,
personally, I think it should be a regional KAC.
As Mark says, there is further discussion going on through the Suburban Centre Master Plan.
And maybe if people are aware of what the proposal is, that there would be submissions there to say, well, which shifts it out of some of these other considerations and leaves it there. My concern probably sort of stems around the fact that there is significant sort of community action evolving, that the people out there are wanting to take ownership of the area themselves and promote investment in private and public to actually lift the place up again. So I would be concerned if we're sort of keeping it in a lower region and there's a lot of work going on to lift it up, that we've then got to go through another process to actually do a plan change to shift it from one to the other.
If a further meeting out there is required, we're happy to do that, because I think what this is suggesting is certainly not to undermine the area. It's to try again have the vibrancy that it used to have, but there is currently no 20 or 30 metre building out there, and there, you know, that will depend on market actions. But do you want to keep that open and allow for development to occur in a unconfined way, so that it doesn't create the vibrancy? And this is what the issues are about.
No, look, I don't, but I just want a public conversation about it that enables people to have a say, you know, and that's the trouble. So can I get it clear? Does this plan that we have in front of us, the amendment that we have in front of us, reduce the height limits in New Brighton?
It does, but as I indicated before, proposing that that's parked and taken out of the chapter to deal with at a future date as part of the zoned area.
Yeah, all right.
Because of the discussions on the Suburban Centre Master Plan. And we can be part of those discussions and bring these proposed change rules to that community again.
I think it would be really worthwhile. I mean, if you had the time to do it, to spend a bit of time with New Brighton, I mean, just as a separate one, I mean, I did kind of send a note through about this a few weeks ago, but the holding one out at Avondale School really didn't, because all the other key activity centres had a key activity centre one, and they saw themselves as a key activity centre and wondered why they'd kind of missed out. So it would be good if that could be done.
We can do that. It just means, though, that those rules won't come through to you until the second group of chapters.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think that solves, it does park the issue. And I mean, I've already said which side of the debate I'm on. I agree that we need to sort of intensify the focus of that little suburban part of it, right up against the foreshore. You know, it needs to come forward. It's way too long. There's just too much development space in there. But there's enormous possibility about what could surround that. And I don't think that taking away the existing height limits, because there were the higher height limits already applied straight down the
Marine Parade,
no, straight down the
Seaview Road.
Seaview Road. And it was the extension out into Marine Parade that caused the controversy in the community. So yes, that's great. So thank you very much.
We'll make sure we have another meeting out there.
Excellent.
Of course, suburban master plans have no statutory consideration too, which is another problem.
Yeah, I know, but New Brighton's actually working on something a little bit more expansive than a suburban master plan. They're not doing the main street now. They're actually looking out a little bit broader, and I think that's actually how New Brighton is going to come alive. I think we've got a wonderful opportunity out there, and I don't want to ruin it by having, you know, multi-storey buildings on the front and pretending that we're the Gold Coast, but when I don't know that we'll ever, well, I suppose climate change could possibly give us the heat that one would compare on the Gold Coast. But the point that I'm making is that we've got to leave options open, and we've got to have an open conversation about that, and actually building some of the apartment ideas, because we have got to get people living in New Brighton. That's the key. And so if the areas down the other end, and again, we've got issues around the flood risk coming from the river, so there's huge challenging issues, but everyone is up for the conversation about how you make it happen. So, I mean, that was a good intervention, David, and thank you for drawing it to our attention, and thank you for agreeing to go out and see them. Right. Shall we stop for lunch, and we'll come back, because it's after 12 now, and we'll come back at 1 o'clock. We'll get focused on the draft commercial chapter, conclude that, and then we'll start on the industrial chapter. Hopefully, if we can get through that, we can complete the land contamination chapter in the time available.
And if not, that will just simply roll over to the next date.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.